So how would you do this one better? How would you make this one be better? What could we do in addition to what we've done so far? We could make this scroll, right? So the way to make this scroll is to wrap your large piece of text in a scroll view. Okay, so I usually do this from XML because it's easier. But basically, there's something called the scroll view. Oops.
What was that hotkey you just pushed? Hotkey?
Control space. Yeah, I've been using control space for a while. So whenever you're in text, you can just do control space, and it gives you can start typing in there, right? And then, for example, the two properties that we always must have are the width and height. So you can copy paste width and height, like for example from here, right? And then the key is to surround the text view with the scroll view, and then reformat everything. At the end of the day, it should look like that, right? So the way scroll view works, you can put only one thing inside of scroll view. You can't put multiple things. So if you need something that's complex, you would put it into a layout and then put that one layout into the thing, into the scroll view. Yeah, you can. So you know that's how you nest. And scroll view basically gives you scrollability, right? So if you look at it now, so menu, timeline, I can now scroll and I can see all the data. It's pretty cool, huh? You can now charge some money for this, right? 79 cents. Okay, so we basically have the so we've got it one better. So this actually kind of, I mean, works, you know, more or less. It's a little jerky and all that, but that's a different story. Cool. So any questions on this so far, in this version? So what's the problem with this version? What? It doesn't update the what? So it doesn't update the data as the data changes in the database, right? Okay, that's one problem. What else? Anything else? Let me introduce you to adapters. Let's say you're building a system like this. Let's say it's a Gmail, for instance, right? So you have a data source, some place where you get your data. It's in the cloud, presumably. It could be a local database. And let's say you are like me and you have probably maybe 10,000 unanswered emails, right? Now you want to show them on the screen. And you have a screen of 1, 2, 3, let's say 10 items. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to glue a data set of 10,000 items to a tiny little screen of 10 items. So what our algorithm right now does is it fetches all 10,000 items, then dumps them into the screen, right, in a scroll view, all 10,000 items, and shows the user the top 0.1% or whatever that is, right? Right? So user has to wait for 10,000 items to get downloaded over slow connection just to see the 0.1%. Right? Not very efficient at all. Wouldn't you agree? Right? And it's a pretty common problem. I mean, like even our little Twitter maybe doesn't have 10,000 items, but it you know, very quickly it's going to be in thousands. even if you have just 100 friends you're following or something, really quickly it's gonna depends on who you follow. It's gonna explode, right? So the solution to that is to use something called adapters. Adapters basically manage this communication back and forth between this data source and the view, right? Got it? So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite our example using adapters. So first, list view and text view are going to be gone. You can comment this out or delete it. Maybe I'll comment it out for now, just so that we can compare the notes later on, but you can safely delete it. Okay. What we're going to introduce is going to be a list view. Okay. And this list view is going to have just a couple of properties. It's going to have an ID, right? If it's easier for you, well, it's probably easier to do it like this. Android ID, because we care about it programmatically. So I'm going to put some add plus ID slash list. And it's going to have those properties, those two properties that we always universally must have. So that's that. Oh yeah, thanks. Right, so we now have a list. A list, you guys know what the list widget looks like, right? You see it all the time. It's like that thing that you see, like for example, in settings. Right, so if you go into system settings, well, this is a list, right? Cool. So now that we have this list, again, just list view and copy paste ID, weight and height from somewhere. Now our timeline activity no longer has text view, text out. We obsoleted that, but instead we have a list view. We call it list. Okay. Also, we no longer search for text out, we search for list, and this becomes list view. And this becomes dot ID is gonna be list. So far what we've done is we can simply ripped out scroll view text view, replaced it with list view, right? And subsequently in timeline activity we found that list view. Now this algorithm of go through all the data and append it to text view is now obsolete. So you can delete it. I'm gonna comment it out just to compare notes later on. But I will eventually delete it, so there's no reason to keep it around actually. Okay. Now that we have the list and the cursor, so we have the list, we have the cursor. What we need as the glue is this thing called adapter. Okay. Adapters, there are many adapters, but basically they fall into two buckets. One bucket is the ones that attach to the array-based data, and the other one is a bucket that attached to cursor-based data. Right? Arrays are more like predictable size, and cursors are not. Right? So So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna use an adapter called a simple cursor adapter. You know, like as the name says, it's pretty simple. So I'm gonna define the simple cursor adapter organize imports. Okay, now we're gonna create it. So we're gonna say adapter. It's gonna be new simple cursor adapter. Now, if you don't remember what all the parameters are, you can put the mouse on it and let Eclipse add the arguments. Okay, and then if you don't know what the arguments are, you can put the mouse over it and it tells you that the first argument is the context, the second one is the layout, cursor, from, and to. Okay, so context is gonna be what? Sure. Layout. Well, layout is going to correspond to this. Let me explain this a little bit. So remember, the data that we're getting is in a form of a row of data, right? It's got its ID. We may have a little bit of a this is created at, user, and text, right? So it could be ID, created at, user, and text, right? Now, what adapter needs to know is what does this guy look like? Let's pick one here. What does this guy look like? How many fields does this guy have? Right? You know, initially it could just have one, or we could use 2 fields, right? So in that case, which one do we want to map where? So for example, if you use the one with a 2, so we could have this guy mapped to a field up here, right? And then have this guy mapped to a field like right here, or something like that. Make sense? So the layout corresponds to this layout of this particular one item, one single row. That's what the layout is. That makes sense? So eventually we can create our own, but remember, system ships with a bunch of stuff. Remember there are like Android resources that ship with Android. So let's try to use one of those. So android.r, just to mix it match. We haven't done this before. .layout, and then let's see what we've got. See, there's something called 2-line list item. I don't know what it looks like, but we can try it, right? Make sense?
I guess we can ultimately use Eclipse to see the layout.
Yeah, ultimately we'll create our own layout, yeah. Now, we're almost there. We now need to provide we have the cursor, that's easy. Now this was the from and this was the to. And if you remember, the from was a string array and the to was an int array. What those two things define is the mapping from string being the database table column names to ints being the IDs of the widgets, right? So basically what we're doing here is we're mapping, if this is a database, then each column is going to have its own name, like user, and if this was a widget here, right, this one is going to have its ID, such as, you know, r.id.text1 or user text or something like that, right? So that's the mapping we need to define, the binding. So we can define those as constants. I could actually do something like this. Static final string array from, it's gonna be string array, and I can say static final int array 2, it's gonna be an int array. And now for from, if you just stick to the basics, who said what, right? So the column names we have defined in status data. So status data dot user and status data dot text. Now the question is, what are the IDs of those two lines that we have in that layout? I think they're called text1 and text2. That's usually how it is. So it's usually something like this: android.r.id. And then I'm looking for something called text1, text2. Something like that. Something like that.
Shouldn't you open up the two-line list item XML and see actually how is it mapped?
Yeah. If you're unsure, we can easily open up that file. So if you remember, our file is in Tools SDK. This will be my layout. This will be my resource. I'm looking for a layout. And we're using the two-line list item. So I'm looking for a two-line list item. This is the XML. And yes, ID is text1 and text2. Make sense? So remember we said those XML files that the Android resources are under platform,
Right.
specific platform data, and then resources, and then I went into layout and found it. Yeah. Cool. Run that, and so let's see. Oh, there's actually nothing to run yet. There's something missing. That's right. So we need to tell the list to use this adapter. So we basically need to say list dot set adapter. Bind view. Yeah, we're going to be using bind view later on. Mm-hmm. So if I go menu, timeline, crashes. So line 26, now pointer exception. I think my my column is now, my cursor is now.
You didn't define it that way. You have to point out from and to.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I forgot the thanks. From and to. Yeah, I forgot to define them, but I forgot to plug them in. So menu, timeline. Woohoo! It's better, right? If you ignore my colors, you know, this is not that bad. So we have basically a column for each thing, but it's also intelligently, you know, created. So the data is being pulled as data is needed, not all at once.
Oh, you mean that's automatic?
Mm-hmm. So if I have 10,000 records,
You can just keep scrolling, you can keep fetching.
yeah. So if you have 10,000 records here, but you have only 1, 2, 3, 7 fields, it may pull 10 fields down, you know, just so it has it for like the next one is the user kind of keeps scrolling. But then as the user keeps scrolling, it's automatically going to paginate, go and fetch more. And it's actually in the process of doing that, it's going to reuse the UI components. So it's going to reuse these components into whatever they were, you know, before. So it's not going to be creating a lot of empty Java objects.
Okay, but how do you throttle it before the data source? Before, at the stage of getting the data from the, let's say, server? Because this is, let's say you've gotten 10,000 records.
Right.
But sometimes you don't want such huge data sets going over wire. So how do you throttle that?
Well, this guy doesn't. It just so for this guy, it just got the data source in a form of a
Right.
cursor.
This is just adapting to whatever's on the cursor.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the cursor level, how do you?
Well, I mean, we're getting the cursor from status data, so however this works, you know, you can throttle it. I mean,
So you set a limit basically.
Yeah, you could do that.
That's
You could just set the limit. Yeah. Yeah. And the data doesn't have to come from a database. It could come from a cloud. So you can implement whichever logic you want for getting the data. Right?
But how on this query, where would you set the limit? Because each of these is predefined.
You can.
I mean, the nature of each of these is predefined. So.
Yeah, well, you could. I mean, as a matter of fact, you could probably just add it in here as well. Limit. Limit
So
10
let's say
or.
limit 5.
But you can also do it in the. You can also do it in selection args. So all these just basically get built into a SQL statement. So you could introduce limit.
Selection. You mean in the select section?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
Normally the set limit is at the end of the SQL statement. Right?
Yeah. So you could do it. You could do it, and then in order by. Yeah, you could do it that way too. Yeah, you can just if I just say limit 5.
So you don't touch 5, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, just 1 second. Let me just run this test, and then I'll come help you, and then yeah. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. See, this worked.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So what we did so far is we just used the layout that we got from system, right? This layout we just got from the system. You know, bold piece of text here and the rest of the text here. But there's only, I mean, system only provides a simple line item and 2 line items, right? But if you want to have 3 line items, like we want to put a date in there as well, right? We're gonna have to create our own layout. So let's create our own layout that's gonna represent a row. Right, so now what you're creating is a layout. Before you created the layout for this entire thing, right? Right? Now you're creating a layout that only corresponds to a single row. Okay? And you're gonna have a piece of text here, maybe a piece of text here, which is gonna be a date, and then you're gonna have maybe the entire text here. Sounds good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there anything like a table?
Yeah, there are different layouts. So there are different layouts here. There's the linear layout, which we've been using quite a bit, right? There's something called relative layout, where children are relative to each other. This one is more efficient because it doesn't require use of nesting layouts, right? Within layouts. So there's also something called table layout, frame layout. Frame layout is kind of like a deck of cards. Things just go on top of each other. It's used for like tabs and things like that, right? Well, let's try. I mean, let's give it a shot. So if close all this stuff. So if we create a new layout, I usually call it row.xml. And sure, you want to try with the relative layout? And you may have 3 pieces of text, right? Like maybe a large piece of text, maybe a medium piece of text, and maybe a small piece of text. Something like that. If I look at the XML, it's pretty nice. Actually, this is like, this makes this new UI. This new UI editor makes designing your linear layout, your relative layout, super simple. Just maybe like way too simple, right? So just drag them whichever way you want. Done. So this is going to be our row.xml.
How do you change it from linear to relative?
How do you change it? You can rip out the other one, or just go in text and like go here and say I don't like
Or
relative.
just change it directly.
Yeah, ultimately just text. Yeah. But this is basically what we've got, right, so far. And as you can see, relative layout basically positions things relative to each other. So basically, for the first piece of text, it said, you know, align parent left, align parent top. Right? That's what makes it top, glued to the top left corner. The other one is align parent top and align parent right. That's what makes it go to the right corner, right? And then the third one, it says align parent left true, align parent right true. So text gives it the entire width, right? And true, and a layout below, and it says it's below layout 1. So that's kind of how we relatively positioned it compared to the other one. Got it? So now, does the text in this case matter, the default text? It doesn't. You could safely remove it, but if you did, it'd be extremely hard for you to visualize what this looks like. So what I usually do in this case, since text doesn't matter, I actually make it look like something that I like. You know, actually I can't do it from here, huh? I gotta do it like this. So I may say for the first one, you know, I may say the text is, you know, an actual tweet, maybe /dot, right? And maybe the text, medium text is something like 10 minutes ago, right? And maybe the small text is an actual, I don't know, let me pull a tweet from /dot. Let's get something real, right? /dot, bam. So let's see what /dot says. Anything related to Android? No, nothing related to Android. I don't know, I'll just pick something. Okay, Google engineers built ultimate LAN party house. Cool. So I'm just gonna pull a something like that and put it into my. Again, it just doesn't matter. Just a piece of text. Bam. So now I can kind of visualize what that would actually look like on the real thing. Make sense? So what? So if text doesn't matter on this layout, what does matter? What property do we care about? Somebody said it. ID, yeah, because we're gonna need to programmatically bind the values to this, right? Because we're gonna programmatically change this. It's not gonna be, of course, hard-coded to /dot, right? So I'm gonna edit ID and I'm gonna call the first one text underscore user. Whoa, what just happened there? Edit ID text underscore created underscore at, and then this I'll say text underscore text. Cool. So I assign my IDs to these three widgets that I have in my relative layout. Yeah, can you generate layouts algorithmically? Of course, everything, remember that everything that we do like is just basically the matter of inflating the XML, right? So we inflate the XML here, and then we can do programmatically what we want. We don't even have to do any XML at all. You could do everything from scratch, right? So XML is just there to kind of like get it going, make it easier, like take care of some basics that are static, that don't change. But yeah, of course, you could build the entire UI like you do in Java with AWT or Swing. Yeah. Cool. So now that we have this one, I'm going to open up my, well, I should have left it open. I'm going to open up my timeline activity, right? So my to now changes. It's not going to be text1, text2, right? But it's going to be r.id dot text user, comma, r.id.text text, comma, r.id.text created that. Right, so my twos are now mapping to my guy with those three things, right? And so now we're getting status data, status text, and we're also getting status data dot created that, because we need three, it needs to be matching. So basically this guy is gonna go into this guy is gonna go into this guy, and then this guy is gonna go into this guy, right? From and to, right? That's the mapping. So they need to be aligned. Cool. So now that we have that, the only thing that's missing is changing which layout manager we're using. So as opposed to our layout two-line list item, which no longer makes sense, we're gonna use our dot layout dot row. Menu timeline. And voila, almost, right? Almost there. Anybody got it so far? So what's the problem? So let's just review what we just did here, right? So basically what we did is before we got a cursor, and then we went through that cursor line by line to get the data, right? And get each line item and print it out. So this was that dumb, start at the beginning, go to the end, wherever the end is, loop, right? So that's what we obsoleted with more of an intelligent list plus adapter. So I'm going to remove that obsoleted code, right? And other than that, in row, we defined the row, we talked about that, and what else did we have that was obsoleted? In timeline before, we had a scroll view plus text view. It was basically a gigantic piece of text on a scroller, right? We now replace that with just a list view. It's made it much simpler. Okay. So far so good. So so that is that. So what we are gonna do next is fix this problem. What's the problem with this now? Date is implemented as the number of seconds since number of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970 in London, England, right? So I mean, most humans don't have capability of reading these numbers, right? I'm sure there's a whole geek subculture where this is the how you press time, but to us that doesn't mean much, right? It'd be much nicer to say like 10 minutes ago, half an hour ago, 24 hours ago, right? That calculating that is easy, like doing the conversion from that number to a relative time. For that I'll just give you, there's a helper function that just, you give it this number and it gives you the relative time, right? So that's pretty straightforward. What is not straightforward, obvious, is where do we inject that logic? So if you remember our design, if you remember our diagram here, right? We had something like this, right? And we had 4 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we had a piece of, a piece of text here, row, right? and we have one item here, we had one item here, and then we had one item below, right? And then we said, take this item and go in here, take this item and go in here, and we said take the, so no, this was going in there and this one was going in there, right? Something like that. Okay. So that's fine if you just go straightforward, straight from one to the other. But the question now was, for if we have that again, for the specifically the created that, which was this item here, and it needed to go here, we can't just go straight inject it. Okay, we needed to somehow put some kind of business logic here to modify it. Right? Like I said, that business logic is going to be a one-liner you call somewhere and gives you relative time. That's not a big deal. The question is more, how do we put it into this place? How would you do it? Any wild ideas?
We just create our own field that computes the difference and puts it into the adapter.
Create our own field, compute the differences, put in an adapter. We could do something like that. I mean, me being a Java guy, what I would typically do is I would go and I would rip apart my the simple cursor adapter and create something called timeline adapter, right? And just figure out which method actually does that binding, right? And then change it and then implement my own. So that's what I did in the book first, and then I realized, oh, there's actually a much easier way, much better way. Somebody actually thought of this. There's something called a view binder. And a view binder is basically designed to do exactly this, provide the binding between these two things. So all you need to do is create a view binder, then assign it to the adapter. It's more elegant this way. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to create a view binder. It's actually going to be a final static final view binder view. Organize imports. When you organize imports, make sure you get the right import, because it may be confusing. So we're getting the one for simple cursor adapter. And then add unimplemented values. Add unimplemented methods. So we're creating a constant called a view binder, okay? And this view binder is basically going to be responsible for binding values from the database to the view, with us having the option to inject some business logic. So far, so good? You guys got this? So a couple of arguments that don't make sense, like arg0 should really be a view, arg1 should really be a cursor, and arg2 should really be, I don't know, column index. So basically what we want to do is we want to first of all figure out if what we're getting is what we care about, right? So the view is going to be, so what's going to happen is this view binder is going to get called for every single column that we need to bind to the view, right? Now, you can return one of the following two values, true or false, right? So let me show you. So basically, Come on. True if the data was bound to the view, false otherwise. So in other words, if we are going to bind the data, we're going to return true, otherwise we're going to return false. So what we can do here is we can first check, are we being called for the column that we care about? Well, the column that we care about is the column where it's the created that column. So we could do two things. We can check if the view for that column is the view that we care about, or we can check if the column index is the column index that we care about. It's up to you, right? So we could do something like this. If not, or let me do this. If view dot get ID, so if the ID of the view is not equal to r.id id dot created that. Okay, so the view that we're looking at is not the same as the we care. Then we're going to return false. And that basically says, look, do whatever you were going to do anyway. Don't bother us. Else, we're going to do something else. Or we don't even need else, I can just say return true. And then we get to handle it somehow. Column index corresponds to the index of that particular item in this cursor. So in our case, the index would be the index, of each of these items in the cursor itself. So status data text the index and so on.
So you could also test, since we know it's the created at columns data that we care about.
Yeah. An alternative way to do this would be to say if cursor dot get column index for column name of status data dot column create that not equal to column index. Right? So only one of these should actually happen. Do the same check. So first one checks that the view is not equal to create that. The other one checks that the column index is not the same as the cursor's column index is not the same as the column index we got in. Either one should work. So far, so good. What next? Now that we know that we have the data that we care about, we can actually get that data, right? So I could say long time is going to be cursor dot get long cursor dot get column index. Oops. Get column index for status data dot column create that Now that we have the time, we can now convert that time, right? So I could have string relative time is going to be, and then this is where the utility comes from. I think it's called date utils. And then get relative time span. So context, and then milliseconds. Span since. Oh yeah, we don't need a con. Yeah. And then this is time. There we go. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to relative time to charge sequence. That's fine. So it's not string, it's a charge sequence. So far so good. So what is the next thing that we do? We got the time, so we got the original time from the database. This is our, milliseconds. We converted that time into relative time. We got now a good time. What do we do with it? Set the view. The view is now gonna be this is really, if we are being called for the text created that, then we know that this is really a text view, right? Right, so I can say text view, right? I can cast it, right? And I can say set text to relative time. Something like that. So the only thing that's left is to attach this view now to adapter. So adapter dot set dot set view binder. Oops. And that should be it. And you can test it and see if it works. Menu, timeline. Two hours ago, 3 hours ago. Let me go back. Menu, refresh. Menu, timeline. 2 minutes ago, 3 minutes ago, 4 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, and so on, right? Much better, right? So list view is a very common component, right? And as such, there are certain things that system actually gives us for free. So let's do the following. Let's convert our activity to a list activity. Right? So right now what we have is we have an activity that has a list view. Another way to do this is to be a list view. So there basically you could make this a list activity. Okay. So we're gonna basically convert this to be a list activity as opposed to be the activity with a list view, right? So list activity is not gonna have let's see, source. All right, implement methods. I need to Control Shift O first to import it. Okay, so list activity, bam. So like list activity, you don't need to import the list, right? Or you can if you want, but then the list itself is gonna be it's better if you define it as opposed to RID list. If you define it as Android .r.id.list, that's gonna find its internal list. Or you can also do a get. Is the get list view? Get list view. You can also say get list view. Simpler. Right. So as a matter of fact, we can now get rid of the timeline set content view altogether, and we can actually we can basically not use it at all. And since I only need lists here and list here, I can actually simplify this a little bit, but removing the list, and just basically referring to a list. Makes my code a little tighter. Reformatted it. Organize the imports. So if I run this, I'm not gonna have the title. So go menu, timeline. I'm not gonna have a title. It's gonna look like this, right? But there's some neat things that you can. There's some neat things that you can do with the list, right? So basically, I simplified it. You can set text. So let me show you the documentation really quickly. Like again, this is just an alternative way. List view. So not list view, but list activity. So list activity is a special activity that includes lists, right? So you can set text if you want, right? And that's the text it's a list and empty. You can actually specify what happens in the case of empty. And let me see. So that's pretty much what we do. I'm looking for methods. So you can set position set list adapter, right? So that's what we do. As a matter of fact, this can even be simpler, like this: set list adapter. They do the same thing. As opposed to get list view, you can do it like this. So set list adapter. But you can also set. I'm pretty sure you can set on empty and stuff. You can tell it what to do when it's empty, and you can set title. There's certain things that you can do. Let me see title. These are the methods that are inherited. You can set title color, right, and so on and so on. So, for example, if I wanted to configure certain things, I could say set title, right, and I can actually point to r.string.timeline as the title. Let me just run it. We did ask for that light to be replaced, by the way, so. Hopefully sometime this week. Yeah.
So how does the list activity know our layout?
See, now it says timeline there. How does the list activity know our layout? Well, we're still saying what to use for our raw layout. But the list just basically takes the entire space.
Oh, so it's not using timeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
The timeline XML is not being used anymore?
That's correct. So we somewhat simplified. So we removed this file altogether, right? So I'm gonna literally delete it. Right? So I have a little less control, but I have a little more standardized and streamlined UI, right? So, and you notice that a lot of system apps actually work this way, right? They don't go crazy with like wrappers around the list, but the whole thing is a list, right? Usually.
How do you set this? You set the title, I see.
Yeah, you can set the title. I set the title to timeline. I could just let it be the app name, so I could say it's the .app name, right? And then it's just gonna say Yamba. But yeah, that's my list.
How would you format the title?
How would I format the title? I don't think you can format the title. I don't think you can. Can you? You can get, but you get, what do you get when you say, when you get title? You get a char sequence. You get just text. Oh, you can? Oh, okay. So let me see. So in the documentation, then this is what the title looks like. So so the title would be. Somewhere, but I can set, this is the ID empty. So if you want to set the empty message, you can do this. This is a nice little feature of the list. I can, for example, set in case it's empty. I can set. I can say, is there a set empty? No. Okay. I can text view. There's gonna be a simpler way, but this will work. Find view by ID, android.r.id.empty, right? So I could actually set this guy to something. Set text, and I can say empty timeline. So for example, if I go and blow up my database, right? So delete star from status. Delete from status. That blows up your database, right? .dump. See, there's nothing there now. So if I relaunch my app, menu, timeline. Oops. If I look at logcat, derp died, unable to start, null pointer exception. First line of our code, there nothing ours, there keep on going. Yamba on create, line 28, null pointer. What could possibly be null here? Well, we don't have this, right? That must be null. Find view by ID. Why is there no view by ID? I guess I would have to provide for that one. I'm sorry? There's no such thing. It's not an empty view, but it's sending the empty value. So optionally, you can your custom view can contain another view object of any type to display when the list is empty. This empty list notifier must have an ID. Okay, so yeah, so I would have to have a custom view in that case, right? So we could still have timeline. We could still have timeline.xml if we wanted to, with the list activity. But you know, it's up to you. I'm just gonna take it out, and then you can show the message of empty, right? You would, yeah. So yeah, so in our timeline, like, I don't think I can undelete that. Probably not. But yeah, you can have that timeline view contain a view. It doesn't have to be a piece of text. It could be anything. Yeah. Okay. So did you get? This was just a nice little. Hey, by the way, you should know about list activity as well as a special kind of activity. Now, how would you make list activity be the entry point? After all, that's probably what we would like to be the entry point into our application. All right, so let's do that. So manifest file. So all that stuff that we had on the string activity, like for example the filter, the intent filter, that's the main one. You would move that to timeline activity. Right? And if you want, I mean, orientation and stuff, that's not that important. Label.
You just like canned this thing with activity. Instead the title of the thing is real small, but you can't have a header.
You could, but then you would have to have the XML file, the timeline. But this, I just wanted to kind of like, hey, you know, if you want to just do a streamlined UI that just gives you a list, because it's such a common thing, right? Like if you look at even the system, you know, if you look at this, how system applications work, settings, well, I guess settings actually now has that custom thing up there, right? So actually, it doesn't. This is the theme. This is the way. This is a theme for settings. This is using the Holo theme. So check this out. If I now launched our app like this, change the theme. This is the since Android 14, or even if I changed in a manifest file the minimum to be Android 14, but theme.holo.light. Let me see what is my why is it complaining? What's my theme? But what if I don't want the light? It doesn't.
Just
Yeah, but it's not. You know, I think it may have to do with the minimum SDK, because it wasn't available until 13. No, until 11. Until so let's try now. I actually may not even need this because I think it's the default. There we go. Right? So now it's just ice cream sandwich. So that was the default theme. So if you put this to be minimum SDK, I think even 11, that's the default theme, is the that bluish kind of theme. Right? And you guys know where this icon comes from, right? Yeah, that tab icon is that icon that we put in the application. Yeah, IC launcher. So it's this icon here, right? So if you have a better looking one, like I think I had a no, that one. So if I take this and copy it into my H, right, and then I presumably I would get the other ones. Copy H M paste and the well, actually I copied. Yeah, copied low into, right, and medium is the medium right here. Copy. So then I now have two icons. So now I can just change this to, I think, icon. It's gonna look a little nicer. Now the other problem that we have are the buttons, right? The menu. Now I got no data and no buttons. There, I got that looking good, right? But I got no data and I got no buttons. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we could now make this be our main entry point and just have this guy have the buttons. So what I can do is I can go to status activity, simply yank the last two methods, the menu stuff, cut it, right, and put it into timeline activity. Drop it somewhere at the bottom. Yeah, so another way is to create a base activity, but the problem is that now I could do that if I didn't have the list activity. But if you have a base activity, then, right, and I have one activity, one preference activity, and one list activity. So what would the base activity be a base of? That's the problem. You could you implement an interface? What's that? Yeah, so see, this is now the menu that looks like the ice cream sandwich menu. So if I click on refresh, that's going to gather data and all that. Yeah. The problem now is that there's another problem here, is that we do this. I did a refresh, but nothing happens, right? Why doesn't this get repainted? Yeah, if I reorient, that's correct. If I do F11, there it is. Ooh, it works. If I we do F11 again, it works. Actually looks kind of cool, huh? Oh, another minor thing that you can do. Wouldn't it be nice if these were links? Right. That's super simple. In our row, you can go to this guy and you can say, well, I don't know where it is in here, but basically you say, so that's that text, the bottom one, right? You can say Android auto link all. So I ended that line to my text, and there it is. Now we're looking at, like, you know, maybe not 99 cents, but we're getting close, right?
So it's only for like everything that's linkable and it's other links.
Yeah, you can choose. You don't have to do all. You can do email, web, address, phone, etc. There's a whole list.
So if you click address, you open up the left.
Yeah, exactly. Got it? Cool. So you have your ice cream sandwich Yamba. Well, not quite, but it's getting there. So let's do the let's do a short break.